this episode of the Teach Middle East podcast, I'm talking with Germain. Cass is the Senko at Horizon English School in Dubai. We discuss some great tips and strategies for ensuring effective inclusion in your schools. And as a bonus, we also discuss teacher and student well-being. Listen up, and please remember to share this episode with a colleague or two.
You are listening to the Teach Middle East podcast, connecting, developing, and empowering educators.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Teach Middle East podcast. Today, I have Germain with me, and we're talking inclusion. I think it's such a timely topic because we don't talk as much as we should about inclusion, and we really should talk a lot more. So I'm going to ask Cass to introduce herself, and then we're going to dive in. Hi, Cass. Welcome to the Teach Middle East podcast.
Hi, Lisa. Thank you for having me.
It's great to have you here. Why don't you just give a brief introduction of yourself, and then we can jump right in.
Sure. So my name's Germain. I'm a British primary school teacher based here in the wonderful UAE. I'm also a qualified Senko, and I love things all inclusive. I am also a sociologist. I have a master's in gender in the Middle East. So my passion is really integrating young people and children from the study of a sociology background, but also from a teacher's perspective and also from a Senko perspective. So it'll be a really interesting conversation for us to have from many different facets and examples.
Brilliant. And how long have you been in the Middle East?
I've been here for 3 years, but I feel like my heart's always belonged. I grew up near a mosque when I was younger, so I always used to hear the call to prayer, and I just feel like there was something in the air that was just, driven me here. And I have a master's in gender in the Middle East, so I thought I'd eventually end up here.
So what made you make the decision to head over here to the Middle East?
I like the way of life. I love the culture. I've been here on holidays many a time. I just love the way as a woman I feel so safe, and I feel as a teacher I'm very respected for what I do. And it's just a lovely way of life here, and the work-life balance, I feel, not right now, but generally when we're allowed to go away and travel, it's a really lovely way to live and contribute back to our society.
Yeah, I do enjoy my time here in the Middle East. Let's say I've been here a little longer than 3 years. And I toy with the idea of going back to the UK. And then I look at my life here, I look at my life there, and I think, wow, I don't know. We'll play that one by ear. So we're going to dive into inclusion a little bit. And for our listeners that are not familiar, I'm sure most of them are, but for those who aren't, what's inclusion? What's your definition of it?
A beautiful question. Thank you. And I'll dive right in. So inclusion is basically making sure that all learners within our school or our classroom or environment are catered for, regardless of their ability, their disability, their needs, their background. So we're making sure that we're providing learning that is effective and purposeful for pupils according to their learning needs or personal needs. That's the easiest definition I can give you.
And in your experience, obviously, with inclusion in the Middle East, how have you seen it changed over your 3 years here?
I think teachers, obviously, as part of our teacher training, we're trained in inclusion. So it's making sure that those children are catered for. And I think there's a drive now, particularly with the Dubai Inclusive Framework, to make sure that all teachers are on board catering for those children with needs. It's not just sort of the Senko's job. We're going to come in and they'll give me tips and ideas. I know teachers now are working harder than ever to make sure that those positive relationships within the classroom and the children are catered for. And that's obviously through conversations with parents, that's conversations with Senkos, that's conversations with class teachers, teaching assistants, so making sure that everyone is on the same page and with the same goal towards that child's end outcome according to them and their learning needs. So I think the change has been huge, and reports have shown that children are happier now in schools. I think so much to the detriment of teachers because they're working harder than ever. So there is a massive improvement in terms of student well-being from recent surveys that have showed it's really working. And that means that children from all over the world, regardless of their background, in schools are happier and are thriving more.
I know you touched on something about the fact that teachers are becoming more aware and they're not depending on the Senko. I mean, whose responsibility is inclusion in the school, would you say?
Absolutely everyone's. It's not just the class teacher. Obviously, ultimately, the attainment, the grading at the end of the year, the teacher dictates in the school report. However, it's a whole school effort. So it's not just, the LSA is with that pupil now, which is learning support assistant. It's not like, it's their job. They're seeing to that child now. It's about the teacher, it's the TA in the class, it is the LSA, it's the SENCO, and it's their peers as well. Children, studies have shown that children with additional needs in a classroom, not only benefits that child with needs, but it actually benefits all of the other children, because they're thinking, actually, not everyone fits into a box in society. You're going to meet different people in life and you really gain skills. And I think it's really important when we have inclusive classrooms, because you get the other children get a chance to, peer buddy, they learn empathy, they learn how to help out. And even for me, I work with little ones in the classroom and they're like, oh, can I get their pencil for them, or I'll help them, or let me help you. So they have those natural caregiving skills that they may not have opportunities to meet, until later on in their life. So I think it's really great to have inclusion and children with all needs in our classrooms.
It is. I mean, I remember when I led schools, teachers, one of the biggest things they would say is that they really don't know how to meet the needs of the diverse population of students that are sat in front of them. And, inclusion is really the goal, but teachers aren't always ready. They don't have the strategies. They don't have the know-how. What would you say are some of the quick tips, quick strategies that any teacher can implement to create a more inclusive space in their classroom?
Do you know what I think the biggest thing you can do, Leisa, and this is for any child, is get to know the child, build a relationship and have rapport. Rapport is not discriminatory. Rapport is free. It's taking that time to get to know that child and their needs on a human level, regardless of gender, race, ability. I think the minute you build positive relationships with our pupils and say, how are you? How was your weekend? Have a quick conversation with parents, or send an email quickly, to the parents at the end of a week. And I know it's extra task and it's extra work and we are stretched right now and I'm in class myself. But, it's reaching out to people, particularly sometimes parents with needs. They can be a bit standoffish with school, because sometimes I think, particularly this part of the world, there can be a stigma with my child's got needs. Some parents may struggle with identifying that and coming to terms with it. But as schools, we're really hard here to help. Teachers are giving naturally. And I think, sometimes it might take us teachers, and I know for myself, I've always had to go, and reach out more to the parents and say, I was really pleased with your child's learning this week. They've done an amazing piece of, drawing. And I think when we recognize the child's strengths, when you come to then having those sort of difficult conversations where, like, at the end of the year, or, those termly reports with the IEPs and things, you're then in a place where to say, look, I have praised their success, but these are the targets we're working on. Because I think sometimes with parents, with children with needs, like I said, they feel sometimes defensive, like it's their fault. So sometimes you have to manage the parents' expectation and emotions. So I think when you create that rapport as a class teacher, I think that instantly lowers people's guards down. So then when it does come to saying, they acted out, particularly I know in primary where children might be a bit more tactile and, physical, it's not all bad. It's kind of like, okay, well, they acknowledge that my child is good, and when they're not having that stigma child, in the classroom. So I think rapport is just a key top tip. And then from there, Leisa, once you get to know children, you're in a better place to educate them. So again, teaching is not about I'm here, I know everything and I'm going to impart knowledge, which obviously, that's what we're trained to do. But it's about learning what the children like, what they enjoy. So if I know I've got a little child with needs and he loves Ben 10, you can tell I work with younger children, can't you? But if I have a child with needs and he's loving Ben 10, then might be more worth me than getting some Ben 10 things to learn our alphabet, as opposed to I'm just going to drill into what everyone else is doing. So that is kind of inclusive practice. And another quick tip as well is just really simple things. And this can be if you're in secondary as well. It's just sort of providing like vocabulary maps, and like visuals are so important for all of our learners. And I think it's really important when people say, word maps, for SEN, for our pupils of determination is the new terminology now that we're using in the UAE. If you cater for those children with SEN, guess what? Everyone else benefits. So, providing a word map for your child with learning needs in the classroom, you could give that to your higher attaining pupils, because actually they may be using that vocabulary effectively then. And then, you're boosting everybody's knowledge in the classroom. They're using that vocabulary purposely and appropriately. And so, again, that's inclusive, because, again, we're using this word map for everybody to learn about plants, for example. It's not just about that one child who really, really needs it. So then everyone benefits. So that's just a quick win there, I would say.
So here's my other question for you, because I know we touched on tips and I know we touched on strategies, but you're going into a classroom. Let's say it's your first week or your first time with that class, and you want to build rapport because you say, rapport is free. What are some quick things you can do to build rapport?
Brilliant. I love this. Okay, so I would say firstly, ask the child. So you could start with as a teacher and give them examples. So you could say a little bit about yourself, and the studies have shown when we're a bit more vulnerable, then we gain likability. So you could say, I'm Miss Germain, I have 2 cats, I'm from Wales. How about you? So you're modeling the language you want them to use. So again, they're getting to know you, you can get to know them. And then you can even have questions on the board, what's your name, where are you from, what do you like? And then the children then can say that to one another. And then again, get them to tell each other what they like about themselves or where they're from. And again, that way then you're choosing common ground. Then as a teacher, then you can say, what do we notice? Oh my gosh, you're from India and so is your family from India. We're all in Dubai. Wow. So again, commonalities create relationships create stronger connections. Again, learning then is in a better position because we're all able to learn in a safe and happy space because we've got likability within the classroom. So that's the quick thing I would say is just talk about yourself, teachers. We're really good at it, talking. So just make it really purposeful. And then there were like sort of little games you can play. And I know now we're in distance, but there's one called The Sun Shines On. It's you probably would have done it in your teacher training, but it's like where they have to swap tables or swap chairs, sorry. You say the sun shines on anyone who likes pizza, and then the children get up and move if they like pizza. Then the children then end up doing it. The sun shines on anyone who likes, McDonald's, what have you. So again, they all get excited and find common ground. That's really effective, particularly with young children, but I have done it with teenagers in the past. And again, maybe they're not really, some children are not getting on or what have you. I've done that as a strategy to build rapport quickly. And it's talking, isn't it? Just take the time to talk to children, even things from an emotional perspective about gratitude. Like I do a lot of gratitude with the young children I work with and say, what are you grateful for? And we do that in an open space. Again, just little opportunities to be vulnerable, not necessarily, disclosure style, but, opportunities for the children to be vulnerable and say, I'm really grateful for my family. I really like that. And then that will resonate with someone else and say, oh my gosh, thank you. Like I'm grateful for my family. And then we do another thing I say it in schools is pass a thank you on. So thank someone in the class that's helped you this week. So again, that doesn't discriminate. It's not about, differentiating. So, little things that they have to thank each other for. It's a really effective tool, again, for recognizing each other, again, building rapport, building those positive relationships. And this is for all pupils to be included. It's not just catering for our, pupils of determination. It's making sure the whole classroom feels happy and safe. And again, when they feel safe and happy, they're in a much better position to learn.
So I want to take the conversation back into the classroom. So let's say you are a teacher and you have a CA, a classroom assistant with you, who's probably helping 1 or 2 children who have special educational needs. How would you suggest that teachers work effectively with their classroom assistants to make sure that the students get the maximum benefits from having those expertise available?
Brilliant. I think the case is resourcing, isn't it? I think it's having, where possible, a conversation beforehand about that child. So it can be, giving the assistant access or information about the child's learning needs if they're working with a group or a small group of children. I know sometimes a lot of teachers is that we're so busy trying to give plans. Something that I do is having a book. I have a job book where you can write the jobs down. And again, you can say to the TA, have it in a book written down like the night before, blocks or what have you for that TA. So that next day, that assistant then can prepare for that lesson and that child ahead of time. And again, that supports behaviour management. So not scrapping in the middle of a maths lesson. We're not going to get a couple of cubes for them. It's about being organised and having the TA on board. And I think then as well, having set questions for the assistant to say, the objective today, they're going to be counting to 10 or what have you. Can you make sure there's numicon? So it's just having things in place beforehand and having pre-written questions. And even if it's writing it on a whiteboard to the child, it's there in front of the assistant. So our job is to make sure that we're communicating with assistants. And I know it's so busy at the moment. Believe me, I know. And I'm battling with my own assistant. But I think the key is to have conversations. That's why I said sometimes having a book can help with the assistant can then look for maths. So if you're in the middle of teaching, they're not interrupting your teaching, this disrupting the children, that person can just use their initiative and just get on with it and have the resources ready. So I think communicate as much as possible, but maybe in the form of a book.
Well, there's this fine line, though. I mean, how much should the TACA, those initial SA, how much should they do versus how much should the teacher do? Because there's such a battle there.
It's a really good question. It's so hard. And I think every teacher's different because some teachers like to do everything themselves and some teachers are more open to delegation. I'm the delegator, like you're an adult. If I say go and get some of this, you do it. But I think it's the right strategy for the right teacher. So I can't give a one size fits all. So how I do it, like I said, I have a book and the TA will follow the book and she knows then for maths, English, science, that's it. And I do that at the end of the day, where some teachers prefer to do it themselves. So I think it does ultimately lie with the teacher because it's their room. And I think often TAs have to kind of use the teacher's strategies and implement them themselves. So I think if you're a teacher listening, maybe worth having a conversation with your TA and set a healthy boundary and say, how is it working for you at the moment? Are you happy with the way things are? Would you rather have a bit more time? And, I speak to you before a lesson, or would you rather a book or I voice note you on WhatsApp? Have that conversation with the TA, I would say, to build up, to put effective strategies in place, because you don't know if you're shouting across the room, can you get this, can you get that? That might create anxiety in the TA. And it may look like the TA is not doing what they're told, but actually you're just catching them off guard and they're trying to support a learner and get some resources. So I think it's about having a conversation as a class teacher and just establishing some boundaries between you and what you're both happy with. And that will then lead to a comfortable flow in learning time.
What are your thoughts on, TA training? Because I know that the quality of TAs vary based on where they're from, what kind of training they've been given. What are your thoughts on that?
I think it's absolutely necessity. And actually, I've actually done a presentation for this exact thing about the role of the TA for the company. I think it's imperative. I think we really, as professionals, sometimes underestimate or overestimate teaching assistants because, again, they start the job. It's like, okay, you're good with children, great. They are thrown into the classroom, not physically. And if the expectation is, and they're expected to do admin, they're expected to photocopy, they're expected to support your children with people's determination. There's so many expectations of these people. And yes, they're good with children, but I think being in a classroom is a whole different ballgame. And I said, the TA is there to support. And often, because of lack of training, what you find as teachers, and I don't know if you've witnessed this yourself, they end up doing the work for the children because they don't know what the difference is between support and doing. And often then you'll find as class teachers, you're going around going, don't tell them the answer, ask the question, da, 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 da. So I've recently actually done a presentation on this exact topic.
I've noticed that there is such a disparity in the level of training that exists for TA. I would actually go as far as saying I think a lot of schools are failing their TAs.
They are.
Because they're providing them with very, very minimal, if any, training at all. I think it's such a crucial role. If you really want to get inclusion right and you want to have the students in the classroom and you want them to have the quality support that they deserve to have, then you have to make training your CAs or TAs or assistants, whatever you may want to call them, priority. It has to be one of your top things to do, because what I found in my practice over the years is that you can come upon really effective assistants and they're coming from schools that made training a priority. And then you found others who are glorified babysitters. Yeah. They come and they literally sit with the child in the classroom. And if the child gets stuck or shows any resistance, they just literally do the work for them and keep moving, which doesn't actually help the child. So hopefully people are listening, school leaders and school owners and teachers, prioritize the training of your assistants, because that's going to determine the quality of provision that you're making for the children.
Absolutely.
I want to take it back to, we talked a little bit about parents and preparing parents, but I also want to delve a little bit into resistance from parents after you've identified that their child might need some extra support and breaking that to them. What's a good way to do that, especially in this region?
It's a tough one, isn't it? I think it's an ongoing battle. I think the biggest thing is never give up. Because, a parent might shoot us down, and don't be offended as a teacher. It's so easy because you're so personal, because you're working so hard for that child and then you get nothing back and it's so disheartening. But I think just look at the bigger picture and think it's about the child and not about the parents. And sometimes we may even need to educate the parents, dare I say it, on these matters. So I think, like I said, the first thing is I would say in September, I know it's late in the day now and it's not too late, but is to try and build a rapport and state the positives about that child and their learning, because that way then you're going to get a win. Especially if that child, and they're known for being, disruptive or what have you. Try and just get the wins for the child. And I think just reporting to parents, even like, picking up the phone and calling them and just saying the praise and things that are working well. And I think it's just reaching out constantly. I mean, sometimes, you get those parents who just don't respond and don't reply. And I think it's just constantly putting notes in bags. I've done it, or I've had to, call home many, many times to build that rapport. Say, we really need a meeting now. It's really important about your child. And I think you just have to keep going and persist.
Yeah, you let them know, oh, your child might be having some special educational needs, and they completely freak out on you.
Yeah, and I think it's about reassuring them. And I think sometimes when you have the IEP, the individual educational planning meetings, and that obviously you set targets for that child, and often you'll call parents in, and I think those forms sometimes are really misleading because they say, oh, these are the targets they had last term, this is what they're working on next term. And I think it's really important to celebrate the success of the children and say, even though this is a report of what their strengths are on, I wanted to, praise your child for doing X, Y, and Z. And we're so proud of the progress they've made. So again, don't sugarcoat it by no means, but I think it's about having a balance. And because those parents are fragile coming in, and they're thinking, that's my little child you're talking about, or, and I think it's about us making sure that we build that positive relationships with the parents and not going in with, okay, this is the meeting. We're going to go, we're working on these targets. It's making it a praise sandwich. So it's not a hard blow, because obviously, especially if a child's been newly diagnosed with something, that can be quite a blow for a lot of parents. So it's just constantly going in with a soft approach and managing parents' expectations as well, and being open. I know schools do this all the time. I mean, we're brilliant, but it's like, we're always here should you need anything. And even as a class teacher, I've always said, if you have any meetings you're not sure of, come and speak to me, and we'll, we can talk about it ourselves. And often I think if you open that door, as well as a class teacher, I think sometimes Senkos, they don't always respond. They might see the class teacher more than the Senko. So I think it's worth, the class teacher just opening up, which we do anyway. And parents will respond. Sometimes you say, like, I'm here if you need anything, and leaving that open door, which we do naturally here anyway. They have our email address, so I get emailed all times a day.
Yeah, I know we're talking a lot about inclusion, and a lot of times we automatically go to the students who are less able. So I want to go the other end of the spectrum, talk about gifted and talented students, because we tend to forget that they're a part of this whole inclusive practice. So do you have any tips or strategies for dealing with your GNT students?
I do. I absolutely do. I think firstly, there's a terminology so obviously gifted and talented children are the ones that naturally, are challenged. And I think our biggest challenge at the moment is if a child is really gifted in sports or they're gifted in art, because they're often contained in a classroom. Obviously, they don't have the luxury of going to the art room or, in some schools. So I think that's a challenge at the moment, is making sure those gifted and talented students, their needs are being catered to. So I think as teachers, I know, particularly in primary, it's providing them with the tools in class that stretch them. So again, we've had to, as a team ourselves, delve deep into our questioning, making sure there's extra challenge after challenge. When, typically you give them a challenge and they go out to play. And so I think now we tend to really hone in on how can we really stretch these children for our G&T and our able learners. And I was going to say another thing as well, there's been it's not been a new theory. So old G&T, which is kind of children who are naturally, talented at a sport or talented at music. There's actually a new theory now called HLP, which is called higher learning potential. It's not new, it's been out for a while. And basically that means it's not just basing children and identifying them according to their academics. It's actually children with potential as well. So that means that every child has basically an opportunity, or every child has a gift. And just because it might not be the obvious singing, football, dancing, what have you, it's finding those ones, even like within an academic, the child can be really great at writing stories. It's identifying those children that are good at story writing and not discarding them because they, not just saying they're a higher attainer, but actually saying this child has a gift at story writing. So it could be another way of looking at G&T as well, not just saying about the sports children or the music children. It's about all children, even in maths. They could be really gifted at maths. So they're going beyond, what's required of them, beyond greater depth. You're thinking this child is actually gifted. So there's a new strategy I want to kind of share with your listeners called HLP, higher learning potential. And that's kind of not a new framework, but it goes alongside gifted and talented, where we're identifying all learners dependent on all of their strengths, not just the usual arts and music, for example.
Yeah, you obviously want to make sure that you're presenting them with opportunities to stretch their learning beyond the classroom.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of times what I found in my practice is that people give them, something they think is a challenge.
Yeah.
Which is maybe, let's say they're in grade 8, you might give them some work from grade 10, and you might think then that's a challenge, when really what it is just a little bit extra work that they could potentially do and might take them 5 or 10 minutes more. But what I want our listeners, especially those that are working with students that are more academically gifted, to think about is how they can incorporate a lot more real world learning and project-based learning into their practice, giving those students real problems to solve and opportunities to present their solutions and taking the solutions on board. I think that's one of the key things that schools can do. So look around. Are you having a problem as adults within the school? How to save money on energy costs? Students who are academically gifted can come up with real solutions to that problem if they're given the space and the time to do it. And I'm sure our listeners in maybe via Facebook or Twitter or LinkedIn can send us some more suggestions on how we can stretch our more able students and provide for them. Because I think in the mix, they're being lost. And a lot of focus is being placed on students who are struggling, and rightly so. When we talk about learning loss during this whole COVID-19 period, we talk a lot for students who might miss their math level or they might miss their reading level. But think about the student who is gifted and talented, who would have missed the opportunity to really excel in what they're good at. But because of what we're going through, then, they are not given that opportunity. And when we go back to school, they might not show the typical learning loss that the average child shows.
You're right.
But what about their extra potential that wasn't tapped into? So that's something to think of.
It is. And I think something I know a lot of schools were doing and moving forward towards are project-based learning now. So it's basically putting the ownership onto the pupils to learn. So again, everyone has the same expectation, but the outcomes differ according to the child's outcome, then that's what they present. So, and it will give an opportunity then with project-based learning for those children to say, like you said, research about recycling, and they'll go off and do their own research, and then they'll have an opportunity to present it in the classroom. That's really effective for distance learners as well, because again, you're trying to make sure those children are stretched whilst being at home in their four walls. So again, project-based learning is another one that's really effective. And then you judge it on outcomes. Obviously, you give them strategies. Then what they produce. I mean, we did something during lockdown, and the things that were produced from these children, I'm thinking, wow, it was really phenomenal to see, and in their presentation skills, and they took pride in what they were doing. So it was brilliant to see. So yeah, project-based learning, I think it'll be the future personally with the way things are going.
Brilliant. All right, so we're kind of winding down, but do you have any quick tips for schools? What can schools do? Just quick tips for schools on their inclusion practice, what to consider maybe for the new academic year, since we're already in the spring term.
I know, can you believe it? I think in terms of inclusion, I think from a leadership perspective, look at your leadership board, because if we're talking about inclusion, think if you're hiring new people, are your leadership boards all men, for example? And what message is that saying to our young girls in the classroom? So is it about how we show inclusivity in our leadership? So being, leading by example. I think then, like I said, think about your seating plans next year, where the attainers are going to sit. So making sure they're matching or having someone that complements them. Rapport is the biggest thing. Again, when it comes to lesson planning, making sure you've got different pupils, different races and backgrounds on the slide. So it's not just the same, if it's a firefighter, maybe rather than a fireman, have a firewoman there. So just making sure that we're being representational as well within our classrooms. And making sure as well there's a variety of literature. I think sometimes it's really important to have different ethnicities within our context, not just because it's Black History Month or Diwali, but continuously throughout the academic year. Think about your texts, and even within science, at the moment we've got Al-Mansouri, he went to space, like making sure we could celebrate that, within the context of the UAE rather than just Buzz Aldrin, for example. So I think now in 2021, everyone is all about, inclusive practice, diversity. So how can we make sure that we're in a global school? How can we make this a global classroom? Yes, we have a British curriculum. There's also, we teach inclusivity, and that's all about celebrating the children in our classroom. And I think, like I said, rapport, you can't put a price on rapport, making sure you just know those children at a personal level. And children ultimately like to be seen, heard, valued, respected. And apparently studies show that you can boost a child's self-esteem, even parents listening, by speaking to a child for 1 minute a day. Not even just saying nothing, just hearing a child for 1 minute, and nothing to do with school, just about them. Like, oh, what are you playing? Or how are you learning? Or what game are you doing? And just listen in. And then you can be like, oh, thank you for telling me, without interrupting. So 1 minute tip there. Try it. Let me know how you get on. Yeah.
I mean, I do talk to my own kids a lot, just in case y'all think I'm some delinquent parent.
Yeah, 1 minute without interruption. It's really powerful. 1 minute a day is really powerful to let your child just talk to you about whatever they want. And I think praise as well more. I mean, we all praise naturally anyway, but again, for those children with additional needs, I know we're honing in on this, but praise them for what they can do, not what we expect the curriculum to do, what they actually have produced. Because I think sometimes we try to stretch them. It's about, that child and where they're learning. So report, praise, making sure we're representing different nationalities within our classroom in terms of books and projects. So everybody is represented equally and fairly.
Fabulous. Really good, Cass. I enjoyed it. Now we're going into the bonus part of the podcast, because I can't have you here and not talk about teacher well-being. Come on.
Oh,
you know
yes.
I would.
So
stick around, guys. Let's talk well-being. Cass is a writer for Teach Middle East magazine, and she writes on well-being, and I can't have her here. I don't think it would be fair to have her here without having a little bit of chat about how we as educators can take better care of ourselves. So I'm going to ask Cass for her top 5 tips on taking care of you during this period.
Wow, Lisa, my heart is smiling right now. So thank you. Thank you. This is my topic of choice. I think self-love, I would say the biggest thing is, what are you doing for you every single day, teachers? Because I know you're working so hard. Don't deprive yourself of anything either. So firstly, self-love, what do you do? What kind of things you're doing for yourself? I know a lot of my friends who are colleagues at the moment, they're like, oh, I won't treat myself at work. I'm not going to have a chocolate bar. I'm not going to healthy eat. I'm all about the healthy eating, Lisa. But I said to my friend, if you want to take a chocolate bar to work, we're teaching in a pandemic, please do it. So treat yourself. Stop being positive self-talk because people are trying to be strict. And I'm thinking now's not the time. And then I was going to say, just create a healthy boundary with yourself with work as well. So, really make sure that, you're not attentive to your desk. And I know our profession is, we have to be there for everyone at 24/7, but create a healthy boundary. And if that's you saying from 6 o'clock, it can wait till tomorrow, please, please, please do that. A big thing as well I pushed on my channel was about routines. Do you have a routine for yourself to make a swift exit out of the door? So again, you always know my lunch is packed, my clothes are ready, I'm good to go, to make that transition in the morning. And you get maybe an extra 10 minutes of sleep. And another thing, finally, sleep as well. Are you sleeping properly? Making sure, you taking the studies show that if you leave your phone outside your room, you're more likely to be in a better state of sleep. And again, because when our phone's on, we use our phone as our alarm. Again, leave it outside your door, leave the door open if your phone's your alarm. But again, you have to then get up, because when you snooze, you break your something called a sleep cycle. So then again, it takes you 4 hours after snoozing to get back into normal place. So as soon as that alarm goes up, get up, physically get out of bed and turn it off. So that way then you're awake and you're alert rather than snoozing it. And I know we're all guilty of it, but again, it just creates a state of sedation as opposed to being awake and alert. So 5 top tips, but be kind to yourself, teachers. I'm with you. I'm 1,000% with you. And I'm on a mission to promote teacher wellbeing this academic year and beyond. I've got you. Thank you, Lisa.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Okay, last question. And that is one book we should all read.
Dare to Lead by Brené Brown.
Yeah, one of my all-time favorites. So he heard that here. Dare to Lead, Brené Brown. That is Cass's favorite. And I think it's also many people's favorite. Yeah. I want to thank you so much for being here on the Teach Middle East podcast. It's been a really, really great conversation.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, and thank you for listening out there. And can I just plug my Instagram page? If anyone wants to follow me on Instagram, I'm at @themindfulteacher_UAE. And I'm here to promote teacher wellbeing and support you guys. Well done, and ladies.
I will link it in the bio of this podcast so people can just click straight through and follow Cass and learn what she's doing to promote teacher wellbeing. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Lisa.
Thank you for listening to the Teach Middle East podcast. Visit our website, teachmiddleeast.com, and follow us on social media. The links are in the show notes.